Why, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Voice of the Rings. I'm your host and guide, Zollin Ironshield, here on Voice of the Rings, and today we're going to start our series on breaking down the lore for the Rings of Power. Now, I know there's a lot of people who have been really asking me to do this. I know there's some who don't really care about it. That's fine. This video is not going to be for everyone. I totally understand. I decided against putting background music in this video. I'm mainly just going to talk with you guys and break it down. I will bring up the movie in still images, no sound, obviously for copyright reasons. But we'll go through, scene by scene. I'm going to talk about stuff. When it comes to this series, there's a few things I want to focus on heavily. I'm going to start by just reading this quote by Peter Jackson, okay? And I'm going to explain it real quick to you, okay? So just stay with me here. And again, if you'd like it, subscribe. Wonderful, sweet. Now, I do other content here on the channel too. We don't heavily focus on Rings of Power, but I do cover it because it is a Lord of the Rings subject, even if I consider it more of a fan fiction, and I'll explain that in a moment what I mean by that. If you're someone who loves the Rings of Power, that's totally awesome. If you're someone who really, really hates it, it's totally fine and awesome too. Whatever your view is, that's totally cool. My goal in this video today is to do it from a more moderate perspective and like glass half full kind of thing, but also I want to always be a voice for Tolkien, so I am going to point out things that I think are disrespectful to Tolkien during the thing, and I'll point out stuff that like this is accurate to the lore, this is different than the lore for maybe newer viewers who have only seen Rings of Power and you've never seen any other series and you haven't read the books or anything like that. I want to point out a couple things that again it might maybe whet your appetite to go read the books or to go watch Peter Jackson's trilogy or to go play the Lord of the Rings online with us, which I covered a lot on the channel, right? And I'll explain the differences real quick of the different levels that I think of when looking and approaching this situation, okay? So the big one that I approach it with is there's just like three groupings that I use. There's canon, which is anything written by Tolkien or by his son Christopher Tolkien with his notes, okay? Or Tolkien's notes. That's canon, all right? And what Tolkien says is canon. Obviously, he made some comments and notes in the past that aren't really canon because he clearly said they weren't. But we're going to touch, that's one thing, canon. There's legends. This is kind of how Star Wars fans do it too, which is I kind of like. Legends is kind of like anything that's very respectful to Tolkien. It's not directly what he said, but it fits in really good to his world and his lore and is totally fair and doesn't contradict anything of Tolkien's, right? And it just fits in really nicely. Lord of the Rings Online does a really good job of this. Peter Jackson did a few things that were kind of made up in a story that kind of fit in real nicely, right? And then there's something which I'm going to break this last term down a little bit more for you, but fan fiction, okay? So fan fiction could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? So, for example, a fan fiction could be something like, you made up a character, a side story. We'll use my character, right? My whole character, Zollin Ironshield, has a whole background story. I haven't really done it on the channel yet. I will show you. When I wrote my character and kind of designed him in the world of Middle-earth, I did it in a way that really respected Tolkien's lore. Yes, he's a Durin's line, and he's kind of put in the line. I've done adjustments over the time and things because I felt like, it doesn't quite fit Tolkien's lore, and I want it to be really respectful to how my character fits into the lore, right? Because that's kind of fun for me. I personally enjoy that, right? And there's a couple different kinds, right? And then there's fan fictions that might just use like locations and character names, and they completely just disregard the original story and make their own story up entirely. Now, this is something that's, you could argue yes and no with different parts. That's what we're going to kind of break apart in the Rings of Power reviews in these episodes, okay? And also, I probably sent you here from episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the episodes, that this will be my kind of little starter opener, explaining my starting point on how I'm approaching this whole topic of reviewing the Rings of Power for you, okay? I want to, again, do it in a way that makes it nice. But anyway, back to fan fiction. Sometimes fan fiction can be good, some can be bad. Sometimes some people will like it, some people won't. And also there's another thing that's kind of like an alternate reality fan fiction, okay? There's times where it feels like, they totally changed the plot in Rings of Power, and you could say, well, this could still be cool if it was like an alternate reality, right? Like, like Star Wars or Star Trek has, or the Marvel Universe, right? Same character, different reality, right? This villain's now a hero, or this, that like thing. Whether you like or dislike that, that's up to you or the writing. I will also make comments about the Rings of Power, whether I like something just as a flat, let's say I'll look at it, I'll break it down into different parts as like, this will just talk about as a fiction, as a fantasy show, Do I like how they wrote this? Do I like the pacing? Do I like this? Do I like that? I'm going to talk about all that too through these reviews, so I'll make sure to go through all of that. So to finish this little intro up, I just want to read this one quote, okay? And then I'll say something. So it's from Peter Jackson, all right? He said, this is talking about the trilogy, the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. He said, we made a promise to ourselves at the beginning of the process that we weren't going to put any of our own politics or our own messages or any of our own themes into the movies. In a way, we were trying to make these films for him, not for ourselves. And he's talking about Tolkien, right? When he says, and that's Peter Jackson. All right, so this is an older quote, but I really like that quote. And what I'm talking about is, you guys know here on the channel that I really don't like to go into politics at all on the channel. Sometimes things will get shoved in our face so much that I have to mention something. But I really just stay away from that because we so don't care about that. So I'm going to, again, approach this in a way of breaking it down based on every scene and what I think about the scene, okay? And there might be one or two things here that might be a little bit of a political push or agenda. I'm just going to let you know, you guys see that already. You're all adults. You see those parts, so I'm not really going to worry about that, okay? I'm going to break down the lore. Right? I'm going to break down the lore, and I'll break down what I like and dislike about things and what would make more sense. I'm not going to go into any deep stuff where they might hook up to any agenda of any country around our world right now or politics or anything. We're going to stay away from that, okay, in these reviews. And again, I know it's easy to link things because sometimes there's stuff that gets a little bit pushed and you kind of feel like, well, is it because of that? Is it not because of that? That's irrelevant. I'm not going to really be going too far into that. I might do little mentions here and there, but again, just so you guys know on this channel, I like to stay really heavily into just talking about fan fiction, talking about video games, talking about Tolkien. We don't need that stuff. So that's just to kind of premise where I'm going to aim for with this series. I will tell you if something bothers me to an extent, okay, in minor terms, but I'm not going to deep dive into things like that. We're not going there. I will deep dive, though, into defending certain things that Tolkien felt with his writing, okay? So if I see something that directly, goes against Tolkien's writing, even if it's something that you could tell he wouldn't have liked, from his writing, like a moral perspective or something, I will go into that, okay? I will explain that a little bit. We won't go crazy on it, but I will go into that stuff. So anyway, with that little intro out of the way there, I was really, we'll have a blast today. I'm going to bring it up here in the corner again. We're going to go through it part by part, but again, I wanted to make this little intro so you kind of knew where we're going to have a starting point for this series. I really, as a voiceover, I do voiceovers, hence Voice of the Rings. I do gaming. I do anything Lord of the Rings on the channel. I love Lord of the Rings. You might, in the background, Lord of the Rings. Big fan. I do Replica reviews too and stuff like that. But my biggest thing is I also want to be a voice for Tolkien. And I want you guys to be having fun and me to be having fun while I make videos. That's always my goals. And I really like Lord of the Rings stuff. So again, one thing I've done, so now we'll move in to start to review the thing here in a second, but one thing I've done to watch the second season is the first season, so many main points were changed. So this will now be my little overview right here of the season 1, okay, moving into season 2. So again, this review video might be a little longer than my rest for all the individuals because I had to do little starts here, right? Let's talk about season 1 just for a minute. So season 1 of Rings of Power, I thought actually had a couple good points. I think there were a lot more things I was disappointed with personally because I'm a big Tolkien fan and I was looking forward to seeing the story I knew put on screen, okay? So now, what happened was there are some things that follow the original lore, and there's a big argument that, well, Tolkien didn't, the writers didn't have the rights to this, the Silmarillion and a lot of the stuff in the Second Age. This is a good argument for some things, but they did have rights to a lot of stuff in the appendices of the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series books, and there are clear things that they changed, okay? They had the rights to, would have been great for the story, and they decided to completely remove them and completely rewrite that part of the story, even though they had the rights to it, okay? So that also happened. So those are both valid points. I want to be very clear. I'm going to be very fair in this point to point out valid points on both sides, okay? You know me. I love watching other people's opinions. I have not watched other people's opinions yet. Making this series, I'm going to completely off what I think only before I watch any of my friends' reviews or any of opinions. This is my honest reviews going through all the episodes first. Okay? That's one of my big goals here. Another thing that I found with season 1 that was a problem is that because they went so heavily into their own storylines that wasn't the original, that it kind of, I think the term is pigeonholed. Is that the term? Pigeonholed them into going into season 2, where there was really no way for them to continue on with the original story plot lines. They had to change it. A big one was they forged the 3 elven rings first. Those were forged last, okay? And there's a reason for that in the original story, a very big reason, okay? And I'm going to explain that. In the original lore, just real quick for people, in the original lore, the 3 elven rings were made by Celebrimbor at the end when Sauron had already kind of taken some of the other stuff, and he made them separate. They do point that out, that he made them separately from Sauron's influence in the Rings of Power, but he made them last because they were kind of like his masterpiece work, Celebrimbor, to kind of fight off Sauron. Okay, so it's kind of weird that he was kind of like told how to make them by Sauron first, which technically that is true in the original lore, but there's a lot of twisting that happens. And again, this series that I'm going to do in these episodes, I'm going to try to break it apart for you, okay? Now, again, I'm going to do a lot of a talking form and then showing you the different scenes while we do it. Hopefully you enjoy that, doing it that way. I do better with remembering the lore myself and then just talking it out with you guys than like bringing up things constantly and reading. I will occasionally, like I did with Peter Jackson or a Tolkien quote, I will bring something up to read about it to kind of give some basis to where you can look for yourself. Because again, take everything with a grain of salt in life. Okay, guys? I think it's important. I love it that people love to hear my opinion. You're the best. Thank you for that. I appreciate. I love talking about Lord of the Rings, no matter what the subject. Whether it's something that I have to break apart or something that I just like about Lord of the Rings. Doesn't have to be Rings Park, be anything. But at the same time, you should still look for yourself. Again, what I say to people: if you like the Rings Power Suite, if it's the only thing you've seen, go check out the books. Go check out the Peter Jackson movies. Go check out the Lord of the Rings Online MMO. They have some amazing legends and, of course, the real canon of Tolkien in the books, right? Now, one thing that's important, too, back to talking about Season 1 here, the intro, is that we have to think about the fact that since they changed so many plot lines, sometimes it makes things better when you change stuff. For example, Peter Jackson had to pull some stuff out, right? He pulled out Tom Bombadil from the original books. In the Lord of the Rings trilogy, he pulled out Glorfindel, right, who is a character beloved by a lot of us in the Fellowship. He pulled a lot of those characters out because he knew he didn't have time to put it into the movie. And I think overall it was a good decision, even though it like pains me to even say that. But like, and also he switched, like what Peter Jackson did is a lot of times he'd switch lines, right? If like he'd give a line from this person to this person if they weren't in the book, right? Like we know that like, Treebeard got a line, right? That was from, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember who it was. Which was, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's one of the other characters. But he also gave Galadriel a line in the Lord of the Rings movies that was Elrond's line and stuff from the book. So what he did was, instead of making up new lines, he's like, well, why don't we just use one of Tolkien's lines and just make a character that makes sense to say it, right? And that's really, very impressive. Impressive way to approach it, right? So again, what Rings of Power did is there's some issues, is that I think one person who said it best, which I don't have his quote on hand right now, like Peter Jackson's, but J.R.R. Martin, right, who wrote Game of Thrones. Now, Game of Thrones is a great series, too. I'm not really a fan of the inappropriate stuff in Game of Thrones. That is also one bonus I will give to Rings of Power series. It has been very appropriate. They haven't had a lot of stuff in it in that way. Like, that, I gotta give them points for that. Okay, let's just, so far in Season 2 and Season 1. But when you change stories, J.R.R. Martin was saying, most writers will take a story from a book when they're doing an adaptation, not writing their own story, doing an adaptation. So they're taking an original story and they decide they're going to change it, right? There's little changes that are needed to adapt to TV and movie. I get that. We all understand that. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about when they fully change it, to write their own story, basically, within that world, which is kind of like a fan fiction, like I was explaining before. 99% of the time, he said, they fail. It's not better than the original. And that is a problem, right? And it might have to do with the fact that we're all anticipating the original, right? Sure. But in this case, the original, I will proudly say, is better than the made-up version that they did in Rings of Power. But again, we're going to break it down. I will tell you things I still liked, but we're going to go through and break all of this apart. That's what this whole series is going to be about, okay? So again, I think that's really important to remember, though. So in season 1, they did some new stuff with the Mithril Story, okay? And as you know, if you followed me in the Mithril Story, I'm not a rager, right? Rager by someone who's like, oh no, you know, like so frustrated about something. And by the way, people like that, I've watched some people with that in the past with season 1. They're right a lot. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes in their thing they get wrong on lore points. Whatever, right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I just don't really like doing that. I want to have a more conversation. I don't really want it to be an argument. I want it to be like a debate, a talk, right? And I'm going to kind of be the person who breaks it apart, right? So I'm almost debating with my, you know, with the show itself as I look through the lore, right? But so I'm going to just do my best to not go into crazy. But as you know, with the Mithril Story in season 1, I was extremely disappointed. I can't even, okay, it was more than disappointed. There was some stuff in season 1 I really liked. You can go watch all my reviews. They're all on Zollin's opinion playlist, the same playlist as this video is on. And I was just like, oh my gosh. There were so many reasons I didn't like the Mithril Story. And why I had to bring this up right now for season 2 is because it affects season 2 so drastically, okay? The Mithril Story, I was hoping would kind of get swept under the rug in season 1. Like, oh, okay, we just won't do that anymore. We won't talk about that one anymore, right? That part of the story. But no, they went full ham into it in the season 2, okay? So in season 2, we have to talk about the fact that, like, so Mithril has the essence. So if you didn't see season 1 of my review in 1, this will be a little bit of a spoiler. This whole series is going to be a spoilers, guys. If you want to watch season 2 of Rings of Power first before I spoil everything, you want to wait to watch my review series. Unless you're someone who just doesn't care and you just want to hear my opinion on it, that's fine too. I'm just throwing that out there. Lots of spoilers coming. But in season 1, we know that the Mithril was created. There was a Balrog, and there was a High Elf, right, from Valinor. And they're on top of the Misty Mountains. And there's a Malon tree, which is a special elven tree. One of the gold with the gold leaves, like you see in the show. On top of the Misty Mountain. And they were fighting, and right when they hit, a lightning bolt happened to come from the sky and hit the tree, right? Okay, and I know I'm being a little silly and sarcastic with how I'm saying it, but this is how I felt when I watched it. And it hit it, and hit them both, and fused their essence through the Malon tree, and then went into the ground, the lightning bolt, and it created the veins of Mithril. Okay, there's so many reasons why I don't like this, all right? And I know you guys are like, this isn't season 2. I have to explain this because this pushes into season 2. The next, like, all the episodes I'm going to review in this series, okay? When that happened, it gives a weird claim to the elves that they should have a right to the Mithril, right? Because, well, it's one of their elves had their essence in it, right? Shouldn't it be part, you know, it's kind of theirs, right? That right there bothered me, so that's one problem. Another problem is the dwarves found the Mithril and shared it with the elves freely, right? With trade. That's the next problem, where they kind of made it seem like the dwarves were like, oh, we don't want to give it to them, right? The fact that the elves need it as like an essence, which gives me a whole Dark Crystal vibe, if you know that Muppet show, if anyone knows what I'm talking about. Like, oh, the essence, okay, sorry, I'm doing voices for the creepy birds in the Dark Crystal. But anyway, that's a big weird one for me. What? The essence, you know, it gives off magical power. Mithril was told a very powerful material. So just so you guys all know, in the original lore, Mithril was just there in the Misty Mountains. And it was that one spot, and the dwarves found it, and the dwarves were like, this is an amazing material, and they shared it with their elven friends out in Eregion, right? And they used it together. They made amazing things, right? So it was just a material that happened to be in that part of the world, okay? It's a very cool material. It was very hard. It had no substance power of, it was very shiny. It was super lightweight. It was super durable. It had no really magical properties. Tolkien didn't give us any of that. So that's all made up for the Rings of Power. And not only just magical properties, they made it like it was like spirit energy or something for the elves, right? Like they were going to die. And I think where they kind of got that misconception of making it like an essence, it comes from the Lord of the Rings movies when Arwen is like starting to die and like being tied to the fate or whatever. And a lot of people think, well, maybe that's what they were talking about with the, you know, end of... No. That was clearly because Arwen was half-elven, and she tied herself to Aragorn and the fate of the world, knowing that Aragorn, hoping he was going to defeat Sauron. So when Sauron's power was growing, she was fading. And that's why none of the other elves were. It was just her. Okay? So that's a totally separate thing. And I think that's what they were cute, hoping people would think, but that's wrong. Okay, so that is something, by the way, Peter Jackson did that correct. That was happening in the lore in the books too with Arwen, but that is not the case with Mithril in the Rings of Power. Okay, so that's 3. A 4th issue, all right, is how the elves just knew about it. They just knew that this happened, so they knew that the dwarves probably had Mithril, so they apparently just knew the dwarves found it. That's another huge lore problem. And then the 5th one, which is a huge one that bothers me, okay, is the fact that the Mithril is so powerful because it's the fusion of an elven spirit and a Maiar evil Balrog spirit, right? So Maiar can be good or bad, but basically a demon version, right? And fuses it, right? So we all know from Tolkien that evil is evil. There's obviously some gray areas for certain characters and stuff, but he's pretty clear that, orcs are evil, Balrogs, things that follow Morgoth are really evil. There's not a whole lot of gray area like in other fantasy fictions, right? He's pretty cut and dry with some of those characters. So the fact that he would be so upset, I feel, with the idea of Mithril being used, the reason it's strong is because of the Maiar Balrog, and the reason it gives essence is because of the elf, right? That whole idea would just be like morally, I think Tolkien would be morally against it, because it's like evil is not strong, right? Evil is corruption. It breaks things down, right? It's not this strong, invincible source of material. My sister is the one that pointed that out to me first, by the way, when we were watching season 1 together, and I was like eye-opening moment, like, wow, you were so right, sister. That is so true. So anyway, those are big things with the Mithril. So now we know that they used the Mithril and they infused it with some of the metals of Valinor, which again was kind of made up. They didn't need metals from Valinor or her dagger, and then they made the Elven Rings. Okay, that's where we left off in season 1. All right, so there's my little intro to kind of bring you into the season 1, and now we're going to go ahead and review the video, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this as part of, so this video again will be a little longer than the rest, because I believe my reviews will be just between 30 minutes and an hour for every episode, depending how quickly we go. So it's going to be a little longer than that. So again, if you're here for the whole video, amazing. If you don't really care, I totally understand. We do tons of the Lord of the Rings stuff on this channel, but I know so many of you have been asking me to do this review, so we're going to do it. All right, so here we go. I'm going to bring up the video. It's dark right now, but I'm going to go through clips of it here, and I have the words on down here so you can see some of the things, but they got a recap, right, for season 1. We're going to totally skip the recap entirely. Okay, we're going to get straight into the beginning. Okay, so this is where we're going to start the thing. I will try to drop a few timestamps for you guys, but I'm not going to be doing 40, 50 timestamps on this video, just so everyone knows. So we'll just have a couple so you can kind of see where I'm at with the video. So we start with the beginning. We got a guy, or an orc in this case, carrying a crown. So basically the whole first part, and again, major spoilers, here we go, guys. The whole first part, I'm not going to be watching the whole series while I do the talks. I'm just going to show you certain things. But the whole starting is basically back in time, and we're back at the Fortowith, and we get a guy who looks like, we're like, who's this guy, right? And we end up finding out he is Sauron. Okay, so this guy is Sauron. Also, I noticed in the entire season 2, all the spots where it's really dark, it's really dark. Okay, that's a big negative when it comes to filming for me. And it's so dark, it's hard to see what's happening. That's an issue with a couple episodes later with the Ents. But anyway, we'll get there in that review video. So anyway, we get this whole spot, and we get, I seek a new kind of power. And like, something that, there's some goods and bads here, okay? I like how Sauron looks right here, okay? I like his whole demeanor. This whole idea that the orcs are kind of being like subjugated, there's some basis in the lore for that, but it's kind of weird how they do it. Personally, I find it kind of weird, but basically if you watch this whole part, right, Sauron kind of like, I'm the leader, and some guy tries to assassinate him or something, and then he kills him. The orcs were not... They definitely didn't like to follow under Morgoth or Sauron freely. It was more like they were forced to, but they weren't like pity them, okay? So we know that Tolkien makes it very clear that the orcs love to do evil. They weren't just like, oh, we're forced to do evil. No, they loved it. Okay, they're horrible, horrible creatures. They revel in doing evil. So even if Sauron or Morgoth wasn't there, they will easily pillage and kill and murder each other and fight each other. And Tolkien makes that very clear in the lore. Okay, so orcs are not nice. All right. This idea that orcs, maybe they'd be good if they just weren't influenced by Sauron and they just lived on their own. No, they wouldn't be. Not in the Middle Earth version of orcs. That might happen in D&D version of orcs or World of Warcraft version of orcs. That is a very different rendition of orcs. We all know that. I have a video talking about that actually on my lore playlist. But I'll point out some videos occasionally if you're curious to go see more individual broken down subjects. So anyway, we get this whole thing, and then Adar's like, you're our ruler. And then, of course, Adar, stabs him in the back, right? Again, I'm just going to kind of fly through some of this. So he gives him a good stab in the back, right? And then I do like the one part, though, when the fighting starts here, right here, when I like to show that Sauron, smacks the one orc and just hits the wall and instantly dead far away. He's very powerful. I don't know how realistic this is, that Sauron would actually be caught off guard and killed like this. It seemed a little dramatic for me. It was, I didn't hate this part. I actually thought this was quite good. I actually enjoyed it from a fan fiction perspective. But again, I went into the TV show expecting this to be a fan fiction. All right, I was expecting it not to follow the lore and to be its own thing with just names of characters and locations of the names of Tolkien. Okay, that's all I was expecting. But at the same time, there are still little tiny weave-ins of lore things. So realistically, I don't think Sauron would have happened. Personally, I don't think he would have fallen for this. And again, we're back in time, and then of course Sauron's been stabbed, and then he kind of dies, and we get this really cool explosion of light, which seems to be, the game doesn't really want to... there we go. We get this really big, huge explosion of light, and then it kind of let's see, explodes, and that was freaking cool. Okay, I like that. That was actually cool. There are parts of the CGI in the season 2 so far that have been bad. This is not one of them. The CGI is really good. I've heard a couple people say, oh, the CGI is really bad. I'm a little confused on that, because at least in the first episode, it was really good. It doesn't get as good in some other episodes, though, so maybe that's what they were talking about. But anyway, then we get some cool... I'll just go through little snippets here. I'll use my little 10-second jump thing. I think it'll be a little nicer. So anyway, and then he disappears, right? And then we get the whole, my children, you are free. I just don't know about... Adar, by the way, the actor's really good, and also the new actor they got is really good. I liked Adar in both seasons. Again, he's a made-up character, just so everyone watching knows. He's made up, right? Sauron's a real character. Adar's made up. So this idea that Adar's almost like a half-shifted between like an elf and corrupted into an Uruk-hai or orc kind of thing. Obviously there is in the lore, Tolkien had many different renditions of orcs, right, in his ideas originally. But remember, we're going to go with what his original canon is, what he says it is. But first he was like they were kind of created out of rocks, but then he felt like Morgoth shouldn't have the ability. Morgoth is Sauron's master, by the way. He's not represented here at all in Rings of Power so far. He shouldn't really be. But basically, the orcs were originally thought to be made of rock, and then Tolkien decided that he wants only Iluvatar to be able to give spirits, so he made it where Morgoth takes elves and men or something, possibly men, and elves mainly is the big one, and corrupts them and turns them into orcs over time. All right, and kind of like so slowly just corrupts them, and then where they're just evil monsters at that point, and they basically become a different race because of Morgoth's twisting, right? But technically they are originally that. Okay, elves, that's the original canon lore from Tolkien. So, and then they're saying, oh, hail Aldar, Adar, Aldar, right? He's the new leader, Again, they're like, we're free of Sauron. There's just some stuff there that's like, we're not going to get into that, but it's just a little weird. I didn't really like that part of it. But then we get this dripping blood, right? And it's dripping down the rocks here. My mom was immediately like, what is this supposed to be like? you know, crucifixion or something, like kind of like nod at. I definitely noticed there was a lot of like religious plugins here, right? And which is kind of weird to put it in Rings of Power or any Lord of the Rings thing. I felt like they're just like grabbing things from the story, in the history of that. Because I'm like, you know, I'm just so you guys know, I believe in Jesus Christ. That's my Lord and Savior. I'm a firm believer in that in real life. But I just thought it was weird they put that into a little bit into this. So anyway, moving down, and I'm never afraid to say that because that's not political. Shouldn't be. So we get this. We get the rat being attacked. So something they do not well here. Okay, so the giant blob and the rat looks really cool. That's this part I was kind of like, I was drawn in with season 2, episode 1 by this part. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, that part was kind of cool with the orcs and they kill him. Okay, it doesn't really make sense. I don't know if he could be caught like that, but that's okay. This is cool, right? And basically, if you know from the original lore, Sauron can be a shapeshifter. And Sauron, just so everyone knows in the lore, and they do follow this to an extent, he is a Maiar, just like Gandalf, just like the Balrogs. They're basically spiritual creatures, all right, under the Valar, which are the gods of Middle-earth, okay? So basically, he's a shapeshifter. He was a warg at one point and like a vampire creature at one point and a couple other things in the story. Tolkien even has a little side story of him being a cat at one point, but I don't think that's canon from what I remember. That Tolkien that was just kind of a fun little side thing that he wrote. But this idea that it's like the glob, the blood from Sauron, which is black, which I like that his blood was black because that's kind of cool. It's like the orcs. So he jumps, you know, grabs this rat and eats it, pulls it in, it just looks gross. But it's awesome, and also poor rat. So this whole part, I thought the animation was really good in this part too. I was like, because season 1's animation was very disappointing to me. So this whole part where he's like, kind of looks like a humanoid form, and he's like pulling himself out into the, you know, slowly pulling himself out of this cave. Kind of a nod a little bit at the whole Gollum moment in the 3rd Return of the King when they're doing a flashback of Gollum, when he's kind of pulling himself out of the cave, all turning into Gollum over time, when Andy Serkis plays him. I kind of felt like there was a nod there to that. There's a lot of stuff in the season 2 that kind of nods to Peter Jackson's movies, which kind of felt a little bit like they were using Peter Jackson's movies to kind of get some clout for everyone watching. But again, that's not the worst thing ever. But I did notice that a little bit. So this part, I laughed so hard. I love this. So visually, they've got a beautiful shot of probably in the mountains in New Zealand or something, you know, like I think. But he jumps out, and you know, you get a little plop, right? You know, we'll just play without sound here. He like falls out. He's like, like a little sea lion. That part just made me laugh so hard, or like a fur seal or something. That was hilarious, amazing. Okay, so I like that. This was great. And then he's like dragging himself, and I thought this looked really good. It's so funny. This part was good. Okay, this part was good. I enjoyed this thoroughly. I don't know. Did you guys like this part? Leave comments. You're welcome to. I'd love to hear you guys' comments. I didn't say this at the beginning, but because I feel like it wasn't relevant. But you guys feel free to leave your comments. Like, I'm totally happy. I'd like to hear more people breaking things down, what they dislike or did like. And less of just like, it's hated, why do you even review it? Or how could you dislike it? It's the best thing ever. I'd like to hear real conversation if possible. Like, there's a helicopter outside. I don't know if you can hear that. So anyway, then we get this moment, right? He's dragging himself along the ice, and then we get a nice little, he's like, oh, but the flop. I just love the flop. This part was great. And then so we get this, like, right, of course, as we know, we hear some whinny scaring thing. How does the horse disconnect? The horse kind of disconnected a little too easily there from making it seem realistic. But I will give points that they didn't kill the horse, but you know. I'm sure my family members will be happy. My one family member hates it when they kill the animals for no reason. But I mean, realistically, she doesn't care if it's like in war. You like the Rohirrim fighting, like they're fighting with the Rohirrim. But anyway, that's not important. The bottom line is, the woman gets horribly murdered, so that's horrible too, mind you. It's just as bad. But of course, it was very dramatic. And then, of course, who pops out? Remember, this blob is supposed to be the first version of Sauron we saw at the beginning, right? I don't know what she was drinking. Some kind of, alcohol stuff. It's like, I don't know what it was. So who pops out? Halbrand, of course, right? So now we're back at closer to moderate times to the season 1. So basically we had a huge jump in time. And I was going to say this a second ago and I forgot. Where was this jump in time? Like, why didn't they tell us? They told us we went to Fort Wyth, right? The Fort Wyth, excuse me. But they didn't really explain. They didn't explain to us that there was a time leap, and a large one. I would assume several thousand years was leaped there. Or one thing I didn't like about season 1 is they condensed the timeline greatly. They're clearly doing that in season 2 as well, but that would be really weird if they condensed it that much. So anyway, we'll see. So we get a shot of Halbrand, and my family member thought, they're like, is he gonna morph into her? I'm like, I think he just mainly needed her essence or something to put his body together, which is kind of made up for Rings of Power. I don't know if he need that or not. Another thing I'd say is some people like the black blob monster. Some people didn't. I was a fan. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really awesome. But I will say from a lore perspective that I think it would be more accurate that he was like, it went into a spiritual like smoke form or something as a Maiar, because we know that Saruman, who gets killed in the Shire, he turns into like a wisp, and then the Valar decide he can't come back to Valinor. They blow him away, right? That's in the original books, Return of the King at the very end. The Scouring of the Shire, which is not in the movie. That's been cut out of the movie originally. Little side note. But anyway, then he's like, yeah, I'm back. Right? He's like, why do I look different? I think it's kind of funny that he's like a different actor. I do find that a little funny that he decided to look like a different human. Why would he try to look? Unless he decide, maybe the idea is for Rings of Power, this is the made up part. By the way, Sauron never turned into a human to trick the elves. That is all made up for the Rings of Power season 1. Halbrand, as much as I like his character, through some of it, he's a made up character. All right. And so maybe he just took on a human form because he's going to try to sneak through the country or something. I don't think that Sauron would need to take on a disguise to sneak around. The only reason he puts on a disguise is to trick the elves. Okay? That's the only reason in the original. Sauron, he's not a pushover. Like, they act like he's like... So anyway, let's go through. So first I'm like, my family's like, well, he has no shoes. Isn't he going to be cold? I'm like, well, he's a Maiar. He probably doesn't need shoes. And then they show him having a fire. And I'm like, well, maybe he does need shoes. Okay, I don't know at this point anymore. Rings of Power could do anything. So then we get this little conversation. By the way, this old man, what he says, I liked it. I actually thought it was really, really good little conversation. I was not at all like the way. Definitely think he looks pretty awesome. Okay, the creature. So the creature looks legit. Okay. Lore-wise, Tolkien does make a few comments about, like, water dragons, okay? So this idea that there's, like, a kraken monster, it's plausible. It could be in legends, okay? Remember those 3 terms? I'm going to be using those occasionally. I feel like this could be dropped into legends. Like, it would fit into Tolkien's world. I don't think it wouldn't fit. But some people said, I've heard that, no, I don't think it would fit. That's fine. That's your opinion. Sweet. My opinion, I think this works just fine in Tolkien's world. But I would have liked to see right here Halbrand's eyes glow or something. Some kind of power. Because clearly the thing gets scared of him and decides not to eat him. Kind of thing. And that was fine. This part was good. I like this. And then he gets up, and then he gets onto a raft with a bunch of people. And what raft is this? It's from the season 1. And we get Galadriel after her marathon swim across the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, the ocean from Valinor. Which... is still, I just can't even tell you how ridiculous that is. Elves are powerful. Elves definitely don't have troubles getting cold and stuff. But there is a point where elves are like, they're kind of superhuman, but there's a point where they will get exhaustion still. Okay? To an extent. There is some stuff that, like, you know, their gift of the Valor will give them, you know, that keeps them warm to an extent. It gives them massive amounts of energies. They won't have to eat for a decent and long amount of time, things like that. But I think this whole idea that she just jumped off from Valinor and swam all the way back to Middle-earth, when you need a ship usually to get there, we're not even going to get into that, okay? That's season 1. I talked about that already in my other reviews from last year. We're not going to do that right now. So we get this moment. And then there's something I'm going to show here. This is season 1. That face. She's not, like, I'm nothing against the actress, okay? But they tell her to be so angry and grumpy all the time. And this is something through all of episode 1 that I'll mention occasionally, but I'll try not to rag on it too much. But why is she always angry? Why is she always angry? It's like, what is her default face? Anger face. And that just bugs me from a character perspective. So let's take away the lore for a second. Okay? No Tolkien lore. Just storytelling, the fantasy. Why is she always angry as a main character? I think picking Galadriel as a protagonist in Elrond was a smart move. It was good. But why would you make the main character so unlovable? That she's always mad, she's always being vengeful, she's always being angry. This idea that she's always after Sauron, that is not in the original lore. So let's bring back in the lore for a second. No, she was not hunting down Sauron all the time in the original lore. And they kind of act like in Rings of Power that she's like a young version of Galadriel versus the third one. But you have to understand, she's not. So if we compared her to human years, she's, you know, maybe, I don't know, 65 here, and the Lord of the Rings, she's 70, right? That's not, she's already really old here, guys. She should have the knowledge and respect an elf should have and learned by then. She's not like she's like in her 70s as an elf. Elves are considered adults at about 100 years old in Middle-earth, just so everyone knows. Dwarves are considered adults at 50, and hobbits are considered adults at 32, right? I believe it is. And then men are, you know, probably around 18 or 20, like, you know, considering ages, right? But it's just like, it's just really, really weird to me that they went so ham into the constant frustration and anger stuff, okay? For her. So I'm not quite sure why they did that. And then we get boom. So that was obviously the pre-cap information for season 1. They added on there. And then we get, of course, the Rings of Power symbol, which, by the way, actually looks pretty cool. Their Rings of Power symbol for this time around. And also Sauron making a comment that it's like it's fate or something. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it would be fate for them to meet. I don't know if that's what is supposed to happen in the story. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. So anyway, let's go ahead and go into the next part here. I'm going to start skipping through some of these parts a little quicker, and I'll talk about what I want. Visuals, okay? Lindon. This is supposed to be obviously going to Lindon. This looks incredible, okay? Points for this. This looks fantastic. Now, I almost would have wished to see more of this, of the visuals of locations, but this looks like Lindon. Again, I've been talking about this since season 1. Locations, names, and locations look great. The names of characters, sweet. There are some things about, again, the acting of deciding to change characters' personalities entirely. It's weird to me, okay? Because in the original lore, we know that Galadriel is a very, like, in the books, and of course Peter Jackson's movies does a good job of showing what the book said, but Galadriel is a very controlled leader. She's well respected, right? She's not constantly looking for vengeance. She's a really well respected leader, okay? Which they kind of hint at in this season, because, like, obviously King, you know, Gil-Galad kind of just forgives her for some crazy stuff she did, right? And he's like, I know you're good, blah, blah, blah. Like, sweet, okay, he's, like, acting like we know her from the books, but in this series, it's like, why are you forgiving her? In their fan fiction version, right? So it's okay. We'll do a little bit of skips here. And then, basically, they get a split off, and then this guy's like, come with me, Elrond, you know, by orders of Elrond, right? And she's like, okay, who the heck are you? Which is fine to think, because I was thinking that too. But just some random elf card. So then, again, I don't mind the whole green dress going up, but again, I don't want to, like, put this off on the actress, because I've seen her do some other things, and she clearly has other good acting things. They're clearly telling her to act like this, right? The original writers. So I kind of blame the writers for this, personally. But because we know, too, in, like, the descriptions of the episodes when season 1, like, she's a young and vengeful version of Galadriel, and she's, you know, and they kind of, like, explain what they have her acting, right? But anyway, she's like, she gets there, and then we have this whole thing, right? By the way, beautiful location. It just looks so good. The locations look so good. But anyway, what happens here is a couple things, okay? So we get, you know, Elrond just informed me that your companion, this is Halbarat. And so I get this feelings vibe that starts in season 2 that there's like this like parent and children relationship, and the children are having an argument, and the dad's like, "Stop it!" Right? That's what I get out of this. Do you get that out of this, or is that just me? I'd love to hear your comments and think what you guys think on that. Is that true? Blah blah blah. Who do you dance so avoid revealing the truth? I can't believe she still wants to not tell him it was Sauron at this point. Now, she should have already told Celebrimbor that it was Sauron, right? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. And then Elrond, rightfully so, is angry, right, of this whole situation. Elrond, again, this actor clearly, I know he's a huge Lord of the Rings fan from what I heard him say a few times and what he explained. And he clearly is trying his best to act Elrond in their version of the story. And of course, Elrond would be really frustrated at this point. But again, Galadriel would have never done this to him. They were good friends, right? Like, and again, she's just like so scared to say anything. And then she tells him it was Sauron. And he's like, oh no. He's like, show me the rings. He's like, the tree's dying. You have to give me the rings. So remember, at the end of season 1, they made the 3 rings that were supposedly the Elven rings could help save the kingdom, right? And Elrond's like, no, I don't want you to use the rings. They're tainted by the Dark Lord, even though we know in the original lore they weren't at the end. But in this, it makes sense that he would think that in their version of the story, right? It would make total sense that he would think that they were evil. Though in reality, Sauron didn't touch them, but he definitely gave them advice how to make them, right? It would be a risk, and suddenly Gil-Galad is just kind of on her side now. He's like, give me the ring. I want to try the ring. Give me it, And something that they do here with the rings, a little bit later we'll talk about, is they kind of, before I forget, the rings, they kind of make them sound like they're like they have a sentient voice, kind of like the One Ring in the Lord of the Rings. Guys, just so you know, the One Ring is the only ring that does that because, can you all answer? You can answer out loud. I'll give you 3 seconds. It has Sauron's soul in it. Okay, that's why it speaks to people. Okay, it's an actual sentient soul talking. There's 2 swords that do that, that are made out of the special meteorite too in the original lore, far back. But that's not Rings of Power, so don't worry about that. But the fact that they decide they're going to make these rings kind of like almost speak, that sound that they make a sound. It's a cool sound. I understand why they want to use it, but again, they're kind of playing off the original movies, right? So he's like, I command you as your king, give me the rings. Which I think is a little weird that Elrond wouldn't give him the rings. He's his right-hand guy. At this point in season 2, they're kind of making him seem like he's the right-hand guy of Gil-Galad. In season 1, they kind of disrespected Elrond, which was weird because he was always he wasn't ever disrespected from the original lore, from what I remember. So he kind of and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to chuck those rings off into the water. That's going to be their made-up plot, right? And then they're going to make some new elven rings, and then plot saved. No, I'm just kidding. What does he do? No. He jumps off. He jumps off the cliff. Sure, dramatic music playing. Yeah, dramatic, indeed. No, Dad, you can't have... Woo! Jumps off cliff. It's like, whoa, okay. He's holding them in his hand. It was dramatic. I'll give him that. It did surprise me. But I thought he was going to throw the rings off into the... And then, of course, she's like, oh, my gosh. And he's like, holy moly. Right? By the way, different face. Because we do know that Halbrand Summer right here says, let my people go. Which... You immediately that came to my mind is the biblical, right, with like the Egyptians and the slaves, right, of the Israelites, and then let my people go to Pharaoh. That was a little funny to me. Again, they kept hinting things. I was like, why is that in here? So he says some stuff about since Galadriel defeated, she sought a new ally. He's trying to he's using his little trickery, which is something that Sauron does in the books. But again, at this point, we're so off from the original lore plot. This is just their own made-up stuff. All right, so he has some conversations. And then he kind of, imprisons him. Sauron could never return, could he? I don't get this, again, they're almost having, this... They're building up this fear and, almost pity for the orcs. Oh, no. They're worried about being re-enslaved. Yes, there was definitely some true lore stuff to them fearing Sauron, as in they didn't want to just be killed and stuff, but they liked doing the evil that Sauron wanted them to do. So it's like, stop making us feel pity for the orcs. That's a weird. It's not. I don't think it's good. There's other characters that could have been better suited, like maybe some Haradrim, which we knew some of the Haradrim were good guys. They weren't all bad. Or maybe some of the Easterlings from Rune. They weren't all bad. So that would have been better to kind of have something like that. So let's go ahead and pop through here a little bit more. We get a shot of... Then we jump to the Wanderer again. Okay. He's, again, this actor, he carries a lot of the show. His parts have always been enjoyable to me. And then we get Nori again. And she's still got the stuff in her hair. Get that stuff out of your hair, please. Again, she's not terrible, right? It's not terrible. But again, we don't really need hobbits, okay? We don't really need them in the show. So, but I'm like, yeah, they just left this one hobbit, that's fine for season 2. She's helping the Wanderer, who's most likely Gandalf, but we all know that. But man, it would be a huge plus in my book if we find out that this is one of the Blue Wizards. I mean, that will be like, it won't save the show for me, like being like, oh, it's amazing. There's still a lot of stuff I don't like in the show, but that would be like, okay, that's cool. That was well done. You know what I mean? Well done. You made us think it was Gandalf. Yeah. Good job. We'll see though, right? So they're, he's having a dream here. All right. So then we have this. I'm assuming we're in Rune, so he's like an Easterling type guy. Looks cool. Love the masks. Better not take it off. I made a joke the other day when we were watching one of the episodes about it's like the Kylo Ren mistake. Don't take off the mask. Okay, this is me. I know some people really that actor's good, right? Did Kylo Ren in Star Wars, so I know a lot of people really like him. But I thought he was way cooler with the mask on and the sound and stuff. I don't think he was nearly intimidating when he took the mask off. They should have kept the Darth Vader effect for longer. Maybe take off the mask in the second and third one. So anyway, as we keep going through here. Okay. So then we get Nori and them at this tree, and then they're like, we need water. Maybe you can use your power to make a tree regrow. And he's like, okay. This part was kind of cool, right? So he tries to use his powers here. He's like, step back farther, right? He doesn't want to hurt her. I do kind of like that idea, and this animation was really cool with the rock. I'm not against the animation. And then he tries to do the tree, and then the tree does, a nice little pop, and he goes, "Rah!" and goes flying, right? And then he's like, oh, Nori, I'm sorry, I didn't do it. And then she's like, you did it. There's all these bugs, right? And all these bugs come out of it, and they're like, hey, we have all this food, and it's like gross, but I understand it is food if you're in a desert. So anyway, that happened, and then we get don't be so glum. She's trying to encourage him, and he's like, I don't want to use my powers. And it's like, oh, okay, whatever. Again, it's kind of cool, just the idea, because you can see how his powers work. If he is a Maiar, if he is supposed to be a wizard, he obviously they think he's a wizard. They're implying he's a wizard, so he's obviously one of the Maiar. I really think it'd be cool if he was one of the Blue Wizards, and later on, which was hinted in the trailers, which is in this episode, but that other guy is one of the other Blue Wizards, the evil one, and maybe he isn't evil later, because there was an original plot that Tolkien kind of said something about one of the Blue Wizards not being good and the other one being good, but I think he changed that later. They were both good guys. They both helped save the Easterlings against Sauron's influence. So anyway, with that, let's go ahead and go through this a little bit faster here. So they talk about dance music, blah blah blah. He remembers the sunset. He's having this dream about a staff. They make a comment there that kind of hints he's Gandalf because of a word he says about the staff. Again, that's happened in this part. And then we get a shot of Halbrand in the jails. Again, it's so freaking dark. Look at how dark it is compared to the rest of the screen, right? And by the way, it's darker even for me than what you're seeing. You're seeing a more natural light. My monitor is darker, I think, than the actual recording here. So then this guy's saying some nasty things to him. Why don't you just tell us about Sauron and where he is? Even though, of course, he's Sauron, which, I mean, this whole part's it's fine. And then he shows how horrible he is, and him and the orcs start beating the out of Sauron. And then we get a whole thing of him, like, the warg. By the way, their second attempt at a warg was an improvement from the first. Everyone made fun of the first warg, and you guys remember how become friendly with this giant warg, okay? So who grabs it? And I mean, it looks good. And then he talks in some black speech and kind of commands it in its sense, right? Kind of cool. I didn't dislike this way. By the way, it looks much better. This warg is a lot better than the other one. Far better. It looks more like an actual demented monster than a cartoon character. But you know, that was cool. It did some black speech. Now we get the next shot. We jump over to the Grey Havens. Okay, the Grey Havens are beautiful. Clearly, they're trying to show this is before the Third Age, so we have some time. Maybe they haven't built them up like they did in the Peter Jackson adaptation movies by that time, but still very, very pretty. The ships look wonderful. The locations look good. This whole part is very well done. Okay, so I like this whole... But I want to point out how he looks is really, really good. Now, most of the time how he acts is how I believe he would act from the books I read. We don't have a whole lot of information about him, but there's one or two things that are kind of weird that he does later that I'll explain. But he looks really good. And by the way, you might be like, he's an elf. Why does he have a beard? That's wrong, you know. No, actually, he's the one elf that has a beard in the lore. Great. Now, there's something that happens later that blew my mind that they did, but we'll explain that. We'll explain that when we get there. All right, so we'll do some more jumps. So again, he looks fantastic, okay? Absolutely amazing. In fact, this is probably like the best shot for a screenshot right here. Yeah, it looks awesome, doesn't it? So really, really good. So basically then at this point, we get a shot of him kind of thinking with some clouds in the distance, right? And then he knows someone's in his shop, which is, I like how he just kind of knows he's there. And Elrond comes out and he talks to him. He's like, you're one of the wisest. Every elf that wants to, at least. And then he leaves at the very end of the Third Age. Or somewhere, not Third Age, somewhere in the Fourth Age. He go ahead and leaves Middle-earth too, is implied. I don't think Tolkien actually said it, but he does at some point. You're the oldest and wisest of our kind. He talks about the Rings of Power, right? And he kind of says, I need to talk to you about these, okay? Cool. Moving on. Then we get a shot of Gil-Galad sending a message to warn Celebrimbor in Eregion of Sauron. Why didn't Galadriel already tell Celebrimbor? Don't even get me started. Okay, so, but that's okay. There's some reasons why, in their made-up lore, why she hadn't already told him. She warned him not to treat with him anymore, though. So I guess she did talk to him. Yeah, that's bad. I don't know why she didn't tell Celebrimbor at Sauron, don't even mess with him. It's a big loophole in their own made-up fan fiction version of the story. Okay, let's just put it that way. So they send a letter. Of course the letter's going to get intercepted. Of course it will. That's immediately what I thought. Now, will it? Okay, spoilers. Yes, it does. It gets totally intercepted. But it's a cool container. I would take that container as a replica. Sure, it's cool. I wouldn't even care if it's from Rings of Power. I'd be like, this thing's cool. And then we get a whole conversation. And this is a very dad-daughter feeling conversation where he kind of like forgives her to an extent for how basically vengeful and out of line she's been for the last whole season 1. Which, I mean, I like that he's forgiving and he's like a good leader in that way. I actually think Gil-Galad is altogether a pretty decent leader. He kind of feels disconnected from the story to an extent because of that, because everyone's kind of doing whatever they want, and he's over here like being the dad figure almost, like, come on guys, you know, let's chill out here, right? So because of your enemy, so basically they have a huge conversation about everything that's kind of happened. She says, and then he's like, I forgive you. And she's like, I will not stop until he's destroyed. I have to put this right. Again, she's back to the vengeful thing. That's what the problem was in season 1, Galadriel. You were going so crazy. You were blinded by your vengeful rage. Again, all made up for the Rings of Power, guys. All made up for the Rings of Power, okay? So I'm like, oh, he just forgave you. You should be like, I'll do my best to put it right. Not, I will not stop until he's destroyed. It's like, no. I'll do my best to put it right. I will help you as best I will. I can. Or to the best of my power or something. That would have been a much better written line. That's my view on it. But, yeah. There's no trace of him. Okay. So they're looking for Elrond at this point because remember he jumped off a waterfall. They don't know where he went. He went down to the Grey Havens to talk to thing. And then, of course, Arwen's like... I mean, not Arwen. Excuse me. Did I say Arwen a second ago? Galadriel. I might have said Arwen. If I did, I apologize. She's not born yet. Galadriel's like, I know where he is. He's probably talking to Celebrimbor. I mean, not Celebrimbor. He's probably talking to Cirdan, right? And it's like... Also, his armor's pretty cool, except it doesn't really look super... It's cool, but it looks very, like, ceremonial. It doesn't really look... It looks a little, like, not real, I notice. Even though it does look cool, the wings. Yeah, anyway, the wings look cool. So anyway, we jump back to Elrond talking to Cirdan. He's like, I think we should destroy it. We shouldn't work it. Use these. Blah, 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 blah. And Cirdan's like, yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, you know, there's a deep trench. I could throw them in the ocean. And Elrond's like, yeah, why don't you do that? And he's like, all right, I'm good at doing ships, right? So the rings must be destroyed. Isildur! Throw it into the fire! Sorry. There's definitely a hint here at that. Originally, Elrond didn't really have much to do with the rings until later. He probably knew they were being made, but he wouldn't really have them as possession of the original lore at this point. He does get one of the rings later, though. We do know he does, right? And also, fun fact, Gandalf's ring actually goes to this character in the original lore, which he does get in Amazon Ring of Power, so that makes sense. The Ring of Fire. No, oh, man, wow, I'm just drawing a blank. That's okay. Let me focus on Rings of Power here. But anyway, he ends up giving that to Gandalf later when he comes to Middle-earth in the Third Age, not the Second Age. So if Gandalf's already here, if he's already the Wanderer, that's totally messed up from lore, but that's okay. We'll get to that point sooner or later. I'll talk about that in these reviews. Remember, I told you this was going to go a little bit longer because of that intro. So that's why this video is going to be a little longer than the other ones. So anyway, they have a whole conversation about this. And he tells a story about Manwë and, you know, why there's a big crack on the ocean, blah, blah, blah. So then Arwen and King Gil-Galad come to Lindon at the Grey Havens from the main kingdom of Lindon, right? And they're like, you know, she's like, let me just talk to him one more time, you know? And he's like, all right, be quick, right? Which is fine, you know? And by the way, Arwen has a slightly different face here again. It's very nice to see a little less of, it's more of the, she cares about her friend, you know, face. If she had more of this face more often in the whole series, I would have been a little more happy personally. But maybe you like the version that they did in Rings of Power. I just don't, because it doesn't link up with the original lore of Galadriel being a very regal and leading by example leader, not by like just charging in vengeful kind of thing all the time. Reason quickly, he says. So they go in there and she starts talking to him. And she's like, you know, you have to trust us with the rings. And he's like, oh, they're already gone. She's like, you know, they have some stuff here. And again, she goes, a scary face. Elrond, he's like a little bit sad about the whole situation. And then where are they? And then boom, boom. We've got Mr. Cirdan here taking them out into the ocean, right? Which, by the way, looks pretty cool. Another shot of, I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so someone's coming. And remember, they knew that someone was on their way, right? The stranger and the previous part and the Nori, the Hobbit. Which, again, drives me crazy that her name is Nori. I know it's short for Eleanor, but Nori is the dwarf. Nori the dwarf. He's the one in the Hobbit where it has, like, his, like, beard is tied up into his hair or whatever. And he's got, like, the points, right? You guys remember that he's, like, the middle-aged one? So it's a little bit weird to me that they chose a dwarf name for it. I don't know why. That just kind of bothers me just slightly. Anyway, I don't want to bump the camera. I shouldn't put my feet on that. Sometimes I try not to bump the camera. Sometimes it focuses, but my desk, it's connected to the desk, so I try not to bump anything too much while I'm doing it here. While I'm talking, is what I mean. All right, so here we have a shadow. Oh, no, a shadow. Oh, there. I moved something. I think my mat was hitting the desk, and that's why the camera was shaking occasionally. So apologize if that was bothering you. So I try to keep track of those things. But, you know, things just happen sometimes, guys, while you're recording or you're doing a stream. Can't always help it. I try my best. All right, so they set a trap, right? A trap that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Okay, it's like a tiny little string, and he's like, puppy. And the person trips on the string, and then he's got a giant rock. He's just going to bludgeon this poor person. I mean, okay. Let's just look at this for just a moment. I'm sorry. So this is a realism thing. That I know it's a fantasy. Okay, I get it, guys. I understand it's a fantasy. But this is a realism issue. It's not tied to, like, big rocks. It's tied to 2 rocks that are, like, this big. Okay? With a rope that's, like, I don't know. I could probably count that. 10 frays? Like, maybe 10? You guys see this, right? Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Maybe, like, I don't know. Maybe a few more than 10? 15 or so? Okay, so my point is, how would anyone trip from this? Like, it would be really, really, really hard to make someone trip from this, unless they were really tiny. But like a regular, like, adult human, which is what they think is chasing them right now, with full body armor, hits this, you're like, oh, what the heck is that? Just keep walking. He wouldn't even care, right? The rock would just move, or the thing would just rip. So that's like, the realism there bugs me. So they walk by, and it trips and throws down again, she's very, I want to point something out. She's a very sweet, like, character. She's very happy, and, like, I get that. I'm not totally like, oh, she's coming to help her friend. She followed along. But, like, we're like, we don't need more hobbits. We don't want more hobbits. The story's not about that. But, again, this is one of their side stories. Rings of Power kind of goes, they have, like, what, 4 side stories going on to their main plot with the rings. I don't think it needed that many side stories, guys. Really. It didn't need that. But, so they get a whole thing here, and they talk for a while. It's like, blah, blah, what? Why are you after us, right? And then, they're like, oh, the walking song. Of course, we missed the giant glowing geodes yesterday. They were not glowing like that at the beginning, if you remember. Oh, you first see that shot with the trees. I paused it on that. It's not really that big of a deal, but still. You see the geodes are the glowing white stuff at the top there. The crystal formations, at least. So they and again, they hint at the song because that was something that was actually good in season 1. That traveling song was actually kind of cute, even though it's horrible the hobbits leave each other behind, but that's moving on. Welcome to the lands of Rune. It's so dark I can barely see, but basically they see a really big vista of Rune. It looks like Rune. I think it's well done. And then he kind of sees his stars, and why are you looking at it? He's like, oh, this is like what I saw in my dream, right? And then as we go through, we have some guy who kind of keeping tabs on him. So now we jump back to Cirdan, or there's the guy keeping tabs on him. We jump back to Cirdan in the ocean, and he's just about to drop the rings into the water. Okay, and he they almost are like tempting him. Again, the idea that the rings are going to be tempting you is not correct. Okay, guys, not correct. It's not right. In the original lore. Now, again, in their lore, sure. In their fan fiction, not their lore. Their fan fiction, okay, that's their story they're doing. Fine, we'll stick to it. They somehow have the ability, probably the essence, elven essence is what talks to the elves, right? Like, don't destroy me, I'll help you, right? I'm not sure. But anyway, right when he's about to drop them in, or actually, he already almost dropped them in, right here. And the boat gets hit by a little wave, and it's like, oh, that must mean they, instead of falling out of his hand because he gets pushed the way his hand is holding, he's like, oh, and drops them into the water. He somehow throws them back onto the boat. Oh, okay, so do you see some problems there? I just see some, that's just choreography problems, personally, for me. But anyway, so he's got the Rings of Power. I know there's a lot of negative things I'm pointing out here, but this is all stuff that bugged me, okay, when I was watching. So I'm just telling you my opinion. If you liked it, sweet. No big deal. So we'll get to some spots that I like. Again, I've already said a few that I liked at the beginning, but there's a lot of stuff going on in this that's like, a lot of things I'd pick apart here with lore. So then he sees one of the rings, and he's like, oh, these are quite pretty, when he puts them under his hand. And we get back a shot of Halbrand again. He starts talking to this guy. Adar comes in, and they have a whole conversation. He's like, I let the humans go. Why would Sauron care if the humans were captive? Who knows? And then he gives him a whole thing that, like, oh, I tell you, Sauron. And then Adar's like, well, you'll have to swear it. And then the other guy's like, swear it at his feet. And he's like, I swear. This part was good. I like this one part. Why is he doing it? No idea. Would Sauron ever do this? But when he says, I swear to serve the Lord of... we have a singing part here, okay? So at the end, basically the elves are singing to leave the shores, okay? We get this shot of... And then again, she has a more mournful face on here, which is refreshing. Again, I'm pointing out the face things. Less of the vengeful constantly and more of the, like, regal, mournful look, which is good. So obviously, the leaves are all falling off this tree. This is not what happens, and she's obviously kind of, like, sad about it. And they're singing, I believe they're singing a song, which is, the song's actually pretty good. Now, there's some stuff here again. The tree looks great. The location is great. This is the same location as season 1 because it's the same spot. It's like their main special tree. This is something that I would like explained slightly. But it does bug me to an extent that I feel like doesn't respect what Tolkien wrote about characters. There is like... It's not really that big of a deal to an extent. But it is a big deal. It kind of is. The fact that like these elves all look so different. They look like they'd be from different elven locations of the world. We know that Lindon was kind of like one group of elves, so she probably should all have the one look that Tolkien explains, okay? So it's a little weird. A little weird of the like the mass mixing all the time of different looking, you know, peoples that are all supposed to be one group of people. This is something again that I think there's certain reasons for that, and like I told you at the beginning of the review, you're all adults, you all kind of know what in the world was things, and I don't need to go into it, so I'm not going to go into it. But anyway, I'll just keep it at that, because sure, I could say other things, but you all know what I'm saying. And again, I never take it bad if it was something like, you know, a play or something, and you're not doing an adaptation of a book, or someone just wrote the story fresh, brand new, and it's what they want to put in the story. Sweet, more power to them. I love it, right? I live somewhere that we have, I'm on the West Coast here in California, we have every kind of person that and background in our state, and I love it. And I love everybody, and I think about everything equally. That's not the issue here. My issue is when it comes to the fact that if Tolkien wrote what a certain group of people look like in a certain location, be respectful to what Tolkien wrote, because it's really not respectful. That's the bottom line. It's just not respectful to the original lore. I know some people are like, when I say that, but you know what? That's the bottom line. All right. And again, I would defend that just as much for any other writer of any other story in our world, of any other genre, if they did the same thing to any other group of people of what they look like, right? No matter, I would defend all of them equally, no matter what they looked like. I'd say, well, they're supposed to be like this group of people, they should look like that in that story. They shouldn't be a mix of every group of people added into that story. If they should look, you know, this background, they shouldn't be a mix of everyone in them. They should look that background, right? Well, no matter what the background of the characters of the story is, that's what they should be. Same thing with all the locations, right? So, I just think that, or have some explanation. Like for the dwarves, we know in the Durin's folk, there's 7 clans of the dwarves. Have different clans from different places. We know there's 7 clans, which means every clan probably has very different looks, right? Problem solved. You fix the issue by just saying, oh, well, these are the southern clan, and this is the eastern clan, and this is the east, south, east, west clan, and, you know, this is the clan of, like, you know, Lord of the Rings Online does as well, right? There's the Zaruka, and there's a couple of the Tamati. There's a couple different dwarven clans that they kind of meet up and work with the Durin's clan, and they have very different looks, and it makes sense because they're a different dwarven clan, right? So it's a very easy fix to be respectful to Tolkien and follow his lore, because guess what? Tolkien did have every looking type of person in his stories, and there are good ones too. Again, a lot of people always say that about the Easterlings, right? They're like, oh, the Easterlings, you know, Tolkien made all of them evil. It's like, no, they're not all evil. That was the point. The Blue Wizards went to Rhûn to help turn them, and a lot of them were good and fought against the evil Sauron worshipping and Morgoth worshipping Easterlings, and that was the reason Gondor and Rohan didn't lose the war, because if all of Rhûn's armies had come and all of Harad's armies had come and they hadn't had good rebels fighting against Sauron in those places and their peoples, they would have lost. Tolkien writes that in the books. That's why the Blue Wizards are important, and that's why the reason that some of the Easterlings and some of the Haradrim were good guys and on the good side and not evil serving more Sauron is a big reason why they won too. right? Just like kind of like the war in the north was a big reason with the dwarves and elves and Erebor fighting the evil armies of Rhûn. They came and attacked them too. It was important that they were holding off those armies during the War of the Ring. All right, side notes. All right, moving on. I just feel like, I don't know why, people get so upset about things like that. I will say, I said something like that in my review the other day, and I got a really weird comment from one person. I was just like, it blew my mind when I read it later. I realized later I read it, I was like, what? Someone basically called me something, and I didn't even realize it. And I was like, wow. It's like, if we can't have a conversation like that, that's not good, guys. It's like, we ought to be, everyone's got to be respectful of everyone. But again, we have to be respectful of Tolkien's lore, just like I was saying, right? But someone was saying, we're not going to go there. It's not important for this video. Moving on. So he's singing the Old Elven Kind, right? And it's really, actually the song he's singing in Elven is really, really good. And apparently there's lyrics to it. I really liked his singing. I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed this whole part. So again, they're all kind of sad. Elrond's sad. And then in walks Cirdan, who didn't Sauron. So anyway, we get a beautiful shot, by the way. So he's like, oh, let him stay there, right? Which is good. This is good response. We get a beautiful shot of Regian. Gorgeous, looks just like how I'd imagine. Again, the city shots, beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. That's awesome. This is beautiful right here. All right, this shot, this is a huge thing that I've enjoyed from the movie so far. And again, sorry I'm destroying it for you, but let me bring it really big. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. That is just absolutely gorgeous. I love that. Very nice. So, and then we get an end thing here, and then you get a little prelude of the second season, but that is the end here of the first episode. So that was my review of the first episode. And then they've got a little prelude of the second episode, but we'll go ahead and end it right there for this one. Whew, I am a little bit out of breath there. So anyway, to finish this up, I'm going to be reviewing all the other episodes. So this is what I thought so far. My overall view of the episode 1 and technically episode 2, but you'll see that in the next episode, which will be much shorter than this, mind you. Again, each of the episodes will be between 40 minutes and an hour, probably, each episode. That's how I did last time. And we're longer because I did my intro, which, again, I'm going to tell you in the other episodes to watch the intro to this video, just so you can kind of know how I'm approaching this review thing. And again, like I said before, I never want to be disrespectful to people's opinions or what they like or dislike. I am trying to review this in a way that is fair to everyone so you guys can enjoy watching it. I'm trying my best not to bring anything about agendas or political stuff. But again, we do have some stuff that seems like occasionally isn't really respecting Tolkien, and they're trying to push a certain thing or something. I'm not really going to get into that too much because it kind of gets into muddy water, and some people have different opinions and views on that in life, and we're just not going to go there, okay? Because I want everyone to feel welcome on this channel. I want you all to be enjoying. This is Tolkien stuff. You're having fun. I'm having fun. That's the goal, okay? Again, of course, I have my opinions in my life too, but all I know is I love everybody, right? I teach a class at my church. I have every background of child in my class, and I love them all equally. And they are all amazing. And I would jump in front of a car to save any of them in a heartbeat. Okay? So I've never had a problem with that. And a lot of times in our world, we're almost pushed to look at things that we shouldn't look at in ways we shouldn't look at it. Right? Especially with people, our different backgrounds or whatever. We're all one human race. And God loves everybody. So this whole idea. But my only point of pointing some of that stuff out there at the beginning of the video was that there should be some respect towards the original authors, okay, on what they wrote on a character. If you're making the adaptation that's supposed to represent that original story, and you have the rights for their story, you should write it exactly how they explain those characters, right? This is not the case if you're writing a brand new story. You do whatever you want in a fantasy or science fiction. Now, there's some if you're doing a historical movie or TV show, and you're trying to match it to historical stuff, you probably have to look into that more too, because people tend to get that wrong a lot, because we weren't quite as all traveling around as much, right? Their port cities usually have a thing. That's why the one I kind of believed more in season 1 was like Numenor, having like lots of different looking people there, because it's probably got a lot of trade. Like ships are coming from the Corsairs and all these locations. But again, it's really not that big of a deal. That's why and again, you guys are all adults and you know things or whatever you believe, and we don't need to get into that. But that's just a little side note with all that stuff. But again, my friends, thanks for watching if you enjoyed this. And again, this was my honest review of everything going on. And so again, for everyone knowing, we're going to be doing lots of other content still. Of course, I'm going to cover the Rings of Power here, but this is mainly for the people who enjoyed it. If you got to the very end of this video, you're amazing. Leave a comment and say, yeah, I got to the hour and 38 minutes mark. I'd be like, you're very impressive, my friend. I don't even know if I could have got to the end of that. But again, I made this video for the people who really wanted it. I know the majority of my viewers don't really care about this, aren't going to watch it. Totally fine. Doesn't even bother me. I'll be making lots of other content still with Lord of the Rings stuff. Have a great and wonderful day in Middle-earth, my friends. Thanks to my Patreons for their support. Couldn't do this stuff without you guys. I've been doing this full-time with Lord of the Rings content now, and it means a lot for you guys' support. And hopefully you guys really do enjoy this review, though. And I feel like it's a very honest review with things. And it's a lot. It's a lot to break down. And I just don't want to be like, I don't want to be super negative, but I also don't want to like give praise where praise isn't meant to be for certain things. So that's why I'm still trying to break it down compared to Tolkien's lore. And hopefully I did that pretty good. I feel like I did. But if I watch some of myself later, I can pick and choose things, but poke at myself like, you could have done this better. Oh, man. Anyway, my friends, you have a great and wonderful day in Middle-earth. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next episodes of Voice of the Rings. Kuzare menu. And everyone is welcome here on this channel, and you have a great day in Middle-earth. I'll see you in the next one, my friends, and I'm at your service and your families. See you in the next ones. Next time, Tell Voice of the Rings will be back.